Welcome back, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover podcast here on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. Auburn fall camp is in full swing. We've finally got enough information after a few days to kind of put together a bit of a recap. So we wanted to get the whole crew together. All of our football reporters are here for the roundtable discussion, bringing that back here on the podcast. We've got Mark Murphy, Philip Marshall, and Jason Caldwell here to talk about the Tigers after, I believe, 4 days of preseason practice are now in the book. So the biggest news throughout the first few days was something we caught wind of a few days ago. Philip had reported it a couple days ago and said that things weren't looking too good. And then we got confirmation from Brian Harsin today that Tyrone Truesdell, no longer part of the team, starting defensive tackle, starting nose tackle for the last couple years, was expected to be a starter again for the third straight season this year in Derek Mason's defense. He will not be returning. Philip, you were the one who kind of, we're hinting at this a little bit earlier in the week, but now Auburn not only has to replace Daquan Newkirk, who went to Florida, but also now Truesdell, kind of their main defensive tackles from last season. Just kind of the impact of losing Truesdell and now the fact that the staff has to focus on that in camp.
I think it's mixed in a way. Truesdell was obviously a returning starter, so to say that's not a significant loss wouldn't be very smart. At the same time, he's not a 50 or 60 snap game guy, and he's a good player. He's not a great player. I think that it's not a crippling blow necessarily. I mean, obviously somebody's got to step in there and do something. We keep hearing a whole lot about Fair, and we'll see about that. But his teammates certainly seem to be impressed with him. But he's not a 50 or 60 snap game guy either, I don't think. So, they're going to probably have to be creative. They got a whole bunch of outside guys, and most of the inside guys are going to be young. So, and that's not a place where you want to be young on the defensive front and the interior especially. So, it happened early enough for them to have plenty of time to figure out what they want to do. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't know Newkirk. That's not something that's going to be, these coaches never knew Newkirk, so he hasn't been in their thought process ever. But Truesdell, not only is he a really good player or a good player, he's also a really good guy whose story is pretty amazing, really, and it's just really unfortunate whatever it was that happened.
Yeah, and I guess Auburn sort of prepared for this unknowingly. I mean, I know they needed some defensive tackle depth, but like you said, Tony Fair has been a guy that's impressed a little bit here at the start of camp. He's a name that I know everybody's a preseason All-American in camp. That's just kind of how it works, but he's a name that we've heard a lot. Jason, a guy that you wrote about a couple times, I remember in spring ball, is Lee Hunter. He was the highest rated recruit in this class before they added Dylan Brooks, so he's certainly not a small addition. Looks like they might need to be leaning on him a little bit, might need to rush his development if he's going to be a guy that's going to help him out there on the interior.
Yeah, you look at it and, obviously for them, you're right, unknowingly, the addition of Tony Fair was a really big one for this team now that you look back on it. And Philip's right. He's not a guy that's going to play 45, 50 snaps, probably going to be mostly first down, short yardage, some of those things. And may depend on the team you're playing too. Whether it's a team that wants to line up, run it, some of those things. But you look and it's more about controlling gaps and can he do that? Lee Hunter's a guy that I think probably could be more of a help in there on second, third downs a little bit, a guy that can rush the passer and give him a little size to do that. So there's some options. Not a ton of experience, but there are a couple of guys that some experienced guys and guys that are in the middle, and one of them's a guy that stepped up some. And I know Mark, probably talk a little more about Marquise Burke because that's a guy that jumped out a little bit in the spring, and he could be maybe the biggest benefactor of this whole thing, giving him more of an opportunity to play in the middle.
Yeah, those JUCO guys. A lot of times they're a lot better the second year than they are the first year, and but we don't know that obviously, and it's But modern defenses, people talk about 3-4 and 4-3s. Modern defenses is just about all of them are multiple, and people play smaller now more often than they once did. but again, depending on who you're playing and what they're doing. So they're just going to have to figure it out. You know, they got some talented guys. I'd hate to depend on a true freshman playing in the middle, but sometimes they're ready for it. We'll see.
And Auburn's got, kind of going through it today, Auburn's got those kind of guys that are, they can play, they're ends, but they can play inside technique. I mean, Colby Wooden is that guy.
Colby Wooden is the best example, yeah.
Right. Zacchaeus Walker, I think kind of the same mold. He's probably a little bit more of a tackle, but he can obviously play end as well. A guy that you wrote about earlier this week, Mark, again, talking about accelerated for these guys now with Truesdell possibly. JJ Pegues might fit a little bit more of that true inside mold because, I mean, he's still like, what, 6'2", 300 pounds. He's not a guy that has all the tools right now, but he's got a lot of strength, and they're excited about what he possibly could be this season.
You know, when they made the move in spring training, it made sense, particularly because Jeremiah Wright, who was in there playing the same position inside, got hurt with a knee injury and had surgery. And he does not look like he's going to be back to play this year. If he does, it's going to be late in the season, and you have to doubt he'll be very ready to contribute a lot. So JJ Pegues could be one of the real key moves of the whole season if he can come in and play right away. The players seem to think he's good enough athletically to make a difference. But, you know, going back to his high school days, he played a little bit on defense, but not much, and mostly at defensive end outside. So it's a whole nother world inside in the SEC with all those big guys coming at you from both directions. But there's no doubt in my mind, Nathan, he's got the talent to help him.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole reason Nick Eason asked him to move over from tight end, is that he saw the potential there and saw what kind of athlete he can be. I was about to say something about a certain player, but I guess I'll just say it now at the beginning of the podcast, is that, like, it's going to be a little difficult to tiptoe around certain things, just because if anyone hasn't read like the practice notes, can't report on players who aren't there and who are injured and stuff like that, guys who are in non-contact jerseys. So skirting around that is going to be a little difficult. I'm sure one of us will slip up and we'll get a slap on the wrist or whatever. But moving on from the Truesdell topic, another new guy, talking about all the new guys all across the board at defensive line. A big addition for them was Demetrius Robertson from Georgia, and he got to practice for the first time today. Mark, I know you were paying close attention to the wide receivers. I know he's played in the SEC now for 3 years in a row, but I mean, in terms of a guy in his athleticism, looked really quick and looks like he might be a guy that they might be looking to fast track his relationship with the quarterbacks and in the passing game, because he looked pretty smooth today.
Yeah, I could tell he was really trying to hustle and impress his new teammates. And he's got a great opportunity. He's been in college for a long time. You know, he's basically been around for about six seasons since he was coming out of Savannah as 24/7's number one ranked wide receiver. And just look at the whole wide receiver core as a group. They don't have a lot of experience other than Shedrick Jackson as a senior. And Shedrick hasn't had many balls thrown his way. So, I mean, he couldn't come into a better situation for an opportunity to play as a newcomer. But it is a problem, I think, that he wasn't able to get in sooner and develop some chemistry with the wide receivers, because they've been throwing together all summer. But, you know, the next couple of weeks, it's really important for him to learn the offense. And like Jason wrote today in his article about the wide receivers, there's a lot more to this offense for the wide receivers to learn than there was in the previous offense. And, you know, something we learned in the spring is they want all the wide receivers to know the assignments at every spot. So, you know, he's going to have a lot on his plate the next couple of weeks. But, you know, since they don't have a real serious game until week 3, that ought to help him get ready.
Yeah, receivers are going to be, I mean, it's talked about a lot in Malzahn's offense. Route trees were brought up often, what the wide receivers did and didn't do. Seems like they're going to, like you said, all need to be on the same page in the pro style system. We're where we are at practice, Jason. We're right in front of the receivers, we're right in front of the quarterbacks and running backs. So you and I and Mark have been sitting there and having pretty good views of what the receivers have been doing. All really impressive athletically. I really just don't think that's a question. We know that these guys are talented, bunch of 4-star prospects, but it's just going to come down to who steps up. How much of an impact do you think Robertson can have in that immediate lineup? Do you think he can be a guy that can be the go-to receiver? Because right now I might lean a little bit more and say a guy like Canyon is going to be the guy that, Bo is going to have a better connection with at the start of the year.
Yeah, I think, before it's over with, they need Demetrius Robertson to play a key role for this team because of that experience, because he's been there, done that before. You're right. I don't think there's any question about the talent level of this wide receiver group, how quickly they can figure out how to play in this offense, how to read defenses, how to figure out coverages and maybe what the answers are. You hear it all the time, and it's mostly done with coordinators, where you hear about, what's your answer when they give you this, what do you answer? What do you call? Well, when you look at the way these offenses are run now, you watch Alabama, you watch LSU, and you watch these teams, a lot of what's done is done when they get to the line of scrimmage, and the wide receiver and quarterback are going, okay, it's kind of that talking without talking. They see the same thing. How many times we see in the last few years where Alabama, they saw the matchup and you go like, well, maybe we had this call, but now you got that guy on you. We know where we're going. And so I think that's part of it. It's part of the learning process. How quickly can those young guys do it? Because Elijah Canyon, Xavier Capers, Kobe Hudson, Javarius Johnson, Malcolm Johnson, and they got a lot of really talented young wide receivers to go along with a Shedrick Jackson and now Demetrius Roberts. I mean, they got those. And then you look at Tavares Dawson, that guy, he looks like he has everything you want in terms of the wiggle and the speed to play in there as well. But now, who can be that guy? And you're right. I like Elijah Canyon. I thought the bowl game was kind of that breakout opportunity for him. But who knows now? Who does it when all of a sudden you go from being the third option to now being the first option? That's a big deal.
Yeah, glad you brought up Dawson too, because he's been a guy that's like Fair has popped in the first few days of camp. Speaking of coordinators and the offense, we got a chance to talk with Derek Mason and Mike Bobo. I enjoy the heck out of talking to Mike Bobo. I think he does a really good job of explaining this offense. Philip, Auburn's got another new offensive coordinator for the first time in 3 years. You wrote about him and Mason and talked to them a little bit the other day about what it's going to take for them to find success in their systems over the course of the season. How long do you think it'll take for them to get their systems really implemented? Do you think fall camp, I mean, it's a little bit shorter than it normally is. How long do you think it'll take before their guys are truly 100%, implemented and have everything down in their system?
Oh, I think it's going to take into the season. I don't think there's any question about that. I think it almost is always that way when there's a change like this. And a guy like Demetrius Robertson, who y'all mentioned, that's got that kind of talent. You never know when the light might come on, and he might be might have a great year. It's a different situation. He might be more comfortable. I mean, Darvin Adams had done nothing at Auburn before 2010. And then he became the go-to guy that had a lot to do with winning the national championship. So, you're always limited, and you're more limited now than you've ever been because of the rules that limit what you can do during preseason camp. But I think it's going to take into the season, and what you hope for if you're them is that you get a little bit better every week and get a little more comfortable every week, because no matter what you do, no matter how much you scrimmage or how many drills you do or whatever, there's not really much way to imitate what it's going to be like in State College, Pennsylvania, or in 8 SEC games in practice. It's just not the same thing. And but the 2002 Auburn team, Devin Aramashadu and Beno Wamanu and Anthony Mix were all freshmen, and they all started in the Los Angeles Coliseum. And,
actually, I think Monte Pitts did too before he moved to defense. I think he actually started at wide receiver that day too.
So you never know. You never know when you got talented guys, and I think they do have talented guys. And some of those guys, even though they didn't play a lot, they have played some. Canyon being one of those guys. So, but I think like I said, you hope to get better every week. They shouldn't be. You want to be as good as you can for the first game, obviously, but you would really hope that you're a lot better for the last game than you were for the first game.
Yeah, and I skipped over him, and I have kind of throughout camp is Xavier Capers being healthy again. I think just him being injured.
I think that's the thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think he might have been I mean, Canyon looked really good in the bowl game, and that was great and all, but that was just a one game. I think consistency wise, route running. I remember Malzahn talking about his blocking last year. He might have been the best of this group in terms of what they showed as true freshmen. Philip, I'll stick with you because when we were watching practice the other day, you came up behind me and we're talking about Finley and how he just dwarfs everybody else on the field who's not an offensive or defensive lineman. He was zipping it out there today, and you could just kind of tell that Bo and him are playing off each other. And I can kind of see that happening where, they don't want to be the one who makes a bad throw right after the other one. It seems like he might be it in terms of that guy who is there, who is going to provide some good pressure, nip at Bo's heels just a little bit, and maybe force him to step his game up just a little bit. I'm not necessarily expecting him to start. I think Bo's kind of got that he should receive the benefit of the doubt. But he looks like he's got a lot of physical tools, and he looks like a guy who might succeed in this pro style offense. What did you see out of Finley the other day, Philip?
Well, I can't tell a lot in practice. He certainly is impressive physically, for sure, and he has a strong arm. Guys from cover LSU tell me they thought that the guys that were there, that he might have been maybe a little bit more raw than some of them, but that he had the highest upside of any of them. So, and the good thing for him is he's got 4 years still to play if he wants 4 years. So, I don't know what nobody's asked him. I don't know if Brian Harsin ever has played two quarterbacks, if you might consider giving him a series here and a series there. If it's close enough, I suspect he might, but I'd be very surprised if Bo's not the starting quarterback against Akron. And then after that, everything depends on what happens.
Yeah, Parsons' past is not playing two quarterbacks, Philip. He likes to pick his guy and go with him. That's the way he's done it. So it's going to be interesting to see. Finley did not look good at Jordan-Hare Stadium last year. Lights and pressure with the defense messing with him a bit. But he was a true freshman. And, he can certainly grow. But I agree with Nathan that, I'd be very surprised if Bo Nix isn't the starter this year. But, it's a good thing to have a second quarterback on the roster who's actually played in an SEC game that meant something. And now they've got two of them.
LSU brought two freshman quarterbacks into Jordan-Hare Stadium in 2014 the last season, and they got outscored, 41-7 and 48-11. So what's that, 89-18?
It's not good. Yeah, it's funny because when Finley, which that's something that people talked about with him when he got on campus too, was that he's kind of he's a good character, likable guy that his teammates already started developing that bond. But on social media, you'd see like Derek Hall post pictures of him sacking him, or Nehemiah Pritchett post pictures of an interception, and they'd tag him in it because now they've got that relation. So that was kind of funny to see over the course of the summer. But we'll move over to defense now, than chatting about offense a good bit. Jason, the newcomers, you talked about it. There's a lot of new guys along the defensive line that aren't at tackle. Marcus Harris might be doing as good a work as anybody along the defensive line right now. And obviously Iku Leota, somebody they think, he's got a lot of experience, got an all Big Ten guy at Northwestern. But what have you seen out of Harris in practice and from what you've talked about with the players so far? The Kansas transfer, I think he kind of fell under the radar just because of where he was from.
Yeah, and he's a guy that I saw play in high school, and so that kind of gives me a little bit of a leg up in watching him play. And one of those guys that you look at him now and you go, it's not the same guy that I saw back then. And so he is a guy that when you start talking about what you need on defense, you start talking about guys that are 280 pounds that can play tackle, that can play end, that can do different things, and he's a guy that can do that. He can slide inside. I won't be shocked at all if we look up this year and, Auburn's lined up and they've got, Marcus Harris, Xavier Capers, and, Kobe Wooden all on the field, and that's your three defensive line. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that. I think they give you versatility. guys can do some different things. And so I think when you look at him, he's a guy that's physical, he's powerful. And I talked to one of our guys 247 that watched Kansas. They cover Kansas and saw them play a lot last year. And they go, for that guy to have 7.5 tackles for a loss last year in 8 games for that defensive line was a minor miracle because they didn't have anybody else. And so you think about now joining a defense where you've got more talented guys around you. You're not going to be double teamed. You're bigger and stronger another year. I think Marcus Harris. They got Caleb Johnson. Obviously, you look at Colby Wooden. They've got some players that are versatile and can move around some. In addition to Zykevis Walker, and heck, knowing Lee Hunter and watching him since he was in the 10th grade, he weighs 320 pounds. But I'm telling you, that guy has the quickness off the ball to potentially slide outside and play end at that size. He can do some different things for you in addition to sliding inside. So, in this day and age, the more of those guys that you got that can do different things, the better off you are.
Yeah, I thought that was an important thing for Philip to bring up earlier, I think, about this defensive line is not for fans not to get pigeonholed into this guy plays this position and here's where he's going to be in the 3-4, because with the exception of your just monster guys like a Tony Fair or Jeremiah Wright that are only going to be nose tackles, they're really going to be able to have some versatility. Still staying with that front seven, Mark, there's really not much you can say at this point about Zacoby McClain and Owen Papo. Everybody knows they're going to be the leaders of this defense. Everybody knows what they bring to the table. But despite having, I think, 113 tackles, 111 tackles, something like that last season, Zacoby McClain thinks he can have even more. And I didn't even think about the fact that he didn't start those first 2 games. So he's making a compelling case for himself. But just how important are those linebackers going to be, those 2 guys? Everyone knows they can be all SEC guys. How important are they going to be for this defense this season?
Especially if they keep just 2 linebackers on the field, they're going to have a lot of responsibility for getting out on the edges and making plays in space. And I don't think you could have 2 better guys for doing that than Owen and Zacoby. And, both those guys made a lot of solo tackles last year in addition to total tackles. And, it might be a good thing if Zacoby does not have 111 tackles, because that means they're getting off the field more often on 3rd downs. There's not as many tackles to be made. So another team is not getting as many plays. But, I think Zacoby could have 100 tackles again. I think Owen could have 100 tackles. But Chandler Wooten is probably going to be in there playing some too and get some of those tackles that he didn't make last year, of course, by opting out. And I think some of the young linebackers are making some progress too. So, I doubt that McClain and Poe will be on the team in 2022. So I think it's going to be important to get some of those young linebackers on the field and get them some experience because, they've got to get that done.
I think they'll both be happy not to have as many opportunities to make tackles this season because they didn't have much help last season. It's for a position you have to run that much and be physical. That's tough not to have any help. But Wooten will probably play as much as either one of them, I would guess. I don't know that, but I would guess that. And then the young guys, so they should be a lot better off depth-wise there this year than they were last year.
And the linebackers like to talk about encouraging the defensive line to play well. That's going to be a big part of how successful they're going to be. If they can keep the offensive line off their linebackers and let those guys make plays, they're going to be a good defense, I believe, because I think they're going to be okay on the back line right now. I think there's going to be probably 2 good players at every position in the secondary.
Yeah, and they were so transparent. That was the thing that was so interesting to me from last season was Kevin Steele and then the defensive coaches and Owen and Zacoby and even KJ, when we talked to him later in the year, they were just like, yeah, these guys aren't ready. Like the freshmen. I mean, they're good, but they are not ready to play in the SEC right now. And just kind of being very open and honest about that. Seems like they take that logical, like you said, that logical step forward and have a little bit more playing time, but Chandler Wooten will offset a little bit of that. Mark, you mentioned the secondary. It's just hard to talk about the linebackers in secondary too much right now because they're on the complete other side of the practice field. And it's kind of difficult to really tell. There's not much going on, period, but it's kind of difficult to take a good look at those guys. But there was an interesting comment, Jason. I want to get your take on this, about that safety rotation from when we talked to Derek Mason. Maybe I'm reading into it too much, but it seems like Bidarius Knighton might be the guy that they think could be at safety right now, just because he talked so much about his relationship with Smoke. But obviously at the same time, Donovan Kaufman is going to compete there. I think Ladarius Tennyson, everybody's kind of hinted he's probably going back to nickel. But that safety battle is going to be pretty important. And Smoke Monday has also talked about how excited he is to kind of teach that guy. Just what are you looking for out of that battle? That's one of the biggest starting position battles in preseason practice.
Yeah, I definitely expect Darius Knight to be that other starter, even though he's coming in with very little time to prepare. He's got a ton of experience, 240 plus tackles, like 11 interceptions at SEMO, and this guy's played a lot of football. And so I think right now the expectations are that he's the other guy at safety because of that experience. And you bring him in for that very reason. You don't bring a guy like that in unless you project him to start. I've projected Donovan Kaufman to be a nickel. I think he's going to be a nickel. I think he's going to play some safety. I think him and Tennis are going to do the same things. I think you're going to see both those guys in at nickel some. There'll be probably the other safeties involved, and it gives you a little bit of depth there. But here's the thing about this secondary. You start thinking about corner, and Roger McCreary is going to be there. I think you can pencil him in on one of those sides. Then you start thinking about the other side and go, you got Nehemiah Pritchett back, you got Jalen Simpson back, and you add Rashawn Miller. You bring in Ro Torrance from junior college. You start going, okay, there's 4 other guys physically that you probably want to try to find a way on the field. And, I think trying to find your best 5, maybe one week it may be, Donovan Kaufman and Tennyson at nickel when you're playing a team that maybe wants to be a little bit more downhill. Maybe you're playing a team that wants to spread it out and throw it a bunch. Mississippi State, maybe Rashawn Miller is your nickel. Maybe you play more coverage. They're going to have some options. There'll be a lot of moving parts in the secondary this year for sure, I believe.
Yeah, and that was when I went and talked to Zach Etheridge when he was in Atlanta that day in July. And he had some interesting about Tennyson. Obviously the safety room was so thin, but they felt like they just wanted him to get reps there. Even if they knew they were going to go after people in the transfer portal, they knew that he might not start at safety. They wanted him to get reps there because, like you said, in certain packages, you can slide him back. You can slide Kaufman back to that safety role, put him on the roof, as Etheridge said. So you wanted him to get a little bit more experience there. We skipped over it a little bit talking about the offense, but Phillip, the offensive line is doing their cross-training thing. Guys moving to a lot of different positions. They're not going to have the starting 5 ironed out for a while just because that's the nature of this group right now. But just like coordinators, they're on their 3rd different position coach in as many seasons. But you've written a lot in the past about guys like Tashawn Manning, guys like Brodarius Ham, guys that have talent and they're just waiting for the right coach. Do you think Will Friend can be that guy that puts this offensive line in a better position? Because you've said it, I've said it, Jason and Mark have said it as well. Everyone around the program, they're a little bit higher on this offensive line right now, I think, than they were a few months ago.
Well, I think that the players certainly seem to think Will Friend is that, and that's really all I got to go on. But he certainly has made an impression with him. But last season was very difficult. It was a completely very inexperienced offensive line. For the most part, guys that had not played significant snaps, probably except for Nick Brahms. And then COVID happened. They didn't have spring practice. Preseason camp was weird, and it was a difficult situation. But now, when they were inexperienced, now they're experienced. And every offensive line coach I've ever talked to has talked about cross training. What most of them have told me, what you're really looking for is you would like to have 8 guys that you can count on. And so that doesn't surprise me. I think that, but I think they got, and it's not popular to say because it's popular to complain about Gus's offensive line recruiting. But I think they've got some really talented guys. They got some guys who are going to be drafted. And now, left tackle is the question. If Austin Drotzel can be what he was when he first came physically, then that's going to be huge. If he does, that'll be a great story. God's had three major knee surgeries, and nobody expected him to come back after the third one. But and I think you've talked to his dad some. I've talked to his dad some, and he was just determined. And so that would be a great story. I'm not sure what's going on with Alec Jackson. Whether he's playing, I heard he was playing some guard. I don't know if that's true, but I heard that. I didn't hear it from a coach, so I'm not 100% sure. But that's what I heard. And but now JB Grimes, when he was here, told me, he said if the light ever comes on for Alec Jackson, he could play in the NFL. And whether it has or hasn't or not, I don't know. But I think Tashawn Manning had some really good moments last year. And he overpowered some guys last year. And Nick Brahms is unbelievably smart. I mean, unbelievably smart. He's working on his MBA now. He's got 2 degrees already, and he's a good player. So I'm old in my mind, and my name's leaving me. The guy that got hurt last year,
Council.
If he's healthy, then he was certainly having an impact last season before he got hurt. So I think they got some options there, and I'll be very surprised if they're not a lot better than they were last year, or a lot more consistent than they were last year.
You know, a guy I'm looking forward to seeing this year is Keandre Jones.
Yeah, that's another.
He did some good things last year, and
he played quite well down the stretch when he got pushed in that fourth.
Big old offensive guard, 6'4", 345. I wonder if that's too much weight, but I'm curious to see if he's going to be in the starting lineup.
Yeah, I guess so much of it depends on Council, and that's why he was kind of the key to this whole thing. I was very skeptical about whether he was actually going to be ready, and we haven't seen the competitive portions of practice, but I mean, he's been out there every time. Philip, I've seen, so Jackson was at right tackle today on the first team some, and then he was at left tackle. I didn't see him at guard, but he probably was. Ham was at guard and tackle. Council was at guard and tackle. So you're exactly right. The cross training seems like it's actually something that's being implemented right now. So,
I think it got a lot of attention when Harsin didn't mention Alec Jackson in his previous press conference before today when he was talking about left tackle. And I think sometimes those guys they start talking about a position when there's a lot of guys and they just leave somebody out. And so I don't know if that was anything to be read into that or not, but he's a talented guy. And but again, I think if Troxel could play left tackle and then give you some options with Alec Jackson about where he plays, that'd be huge. I wonder, I haven't heard any speak up about the backup center, who that would be. Who would be the center if something happened to Nick Grimes?
Yeah, you got Jalil Irvin, who has been there.
Yeah,
Brandon Council has experience there. My guess is if push came to shove, it might end up being Brandon Council. You're right about what offensive line coaches are looking for. What they really like to have is a 6th, 7th, and 8th guy, and guys that could play,
Right.
Fill in multiple spots. And that's the thing. Right now, you look at this line and you go, Nick Brahms could obviously play guard. He can play center. You look at, Brodarius Ham has played guard. He's playing tackle. Austin Troxel has played guard. I think Keandre Jones is a guard. Tashawn Manning's a guard. Those guys are kind of what they are, but most of those other guys can play multiple spots. So now it's just a matter of getting them familiar in early camp with playing other spots. And then probably sometime next week, you start to focus in and go, all right, now let's see if we can start to begin to find out who our top 5 are when we get to these scrimmage situations.
Yeah, if you can, a guy that can play more than one position and is smart enough to have both of them down and physically talented enough to play both of them, that's an extremely valuable thing to have on anything.
Yeah, it's definitely football season when people are reading, like you said about Alec Jackson, people are reading more into who we don't talk about, and the coaches just omit one name rather than people we are talking about, oh, you didn't bring up this one player. Was he not at practice? It's like, you can't name everybody on the roster, but people are just excited for the season to start. But we'll close out there. Appreciate you guys coming on. I thought that was a lot of fun. Y'all did a great job. It was a fun conversation. The only reason I went back to that, and I probably would have looked at the roundtable stuff. I've talked to Brandon Marcello about it a little bit. I know he did that last season. But the only reason is because two different people suggested to me that we bring that back and kind of have more of a conversational podcast. I know we've been lacking that a little bit. So I really do appreciate and really do dive into y'all's feedback when y'all let me know what stuff I need to do better, because I want this to become something that becomes routine listening for everybody who follows Auburn. It becomes a good podcast. I know that we're continuing to grow and continuing to get better. So definitely let me know what you guys thought of today's episode. By nathanking@gmail.com is where you can find me. You can DM me on Twitter. You can DM me on our message boards. If you did enjoy the show, please leave us a 5-star review. That really, really helps us out. It's the number one thing that helps out our traction, helps out what we look like on the front page of your favorite podcast site. It's the number one thing. So would really appreciate that. Again, if you have a suggestion, please shoot me a direct message. Let me know what you guys think. I really do take it to heart and really want the show to be the best possible Auburn coverage for you guys. So appreciate everybody listening. The intro and outro music today is by Beats by Mordecai, my good friend. You can find him on on SoundCloud, Twitter, and Instagram. Not quite there yet. SoundCloud, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find him, Beats by Mordecai. Thanks so much to him for the intro and outro music. And we will keep on rolling in fall camp. Keep things locked at auburnundercover.com. We've got you covered top to bottom on preseason practices. Until the next episode, I will catch you guys later. Everybody have a great rest of the week.